Satnam. Simran here, teaching you a little bit about divine alignment. So one of the things that I think is really important is to locate your navel. And most people go, oh, navel point, belly button. Actually, it's about 3 inches below your belly button, or even between your 2 hip bones. So hip bones, forward in, navel point. And it's not actually the external muscles. It's really much deeper. And it's esoteric as well as physical. So there isn't one particular muscle that you're looking for, but rather a point where you can begin the contraction and draw the outer abdominals back towards your sacrum. Your sacrum is a bone on the back of your body. It's the base of your spine. It's actually a holy bone. It has 8 holes. But it also is a really important component to building correct posture. This goes for seated posture, standing posture, any posture. And that contraction of the navel point back towards the sacrum also instigates the pelvic floor slightly lifting. Now, what does that sound like? Pelvic floor lifting, navel point drawing back. Root lock. Well, root lock we usually use to teach beginners the external muscles of squeezing the rectum, the sex organ, and the navel point. But as we grow in our practice, it becomes much more subtle. And it really is the navel point and pelvic floor contracting and lifting and using just enough tension to hold the base of your spine in relationship to gravity. Gravity is a constant. Gravity is what I would call an equal opportunity compressor. So whatever you offer it, it will compress. If you offer it poor posture, it will compress that poor posture. But if you offer it your navel point and then actually actively grow roots down or energetically press down through whatever part of your body is touching the earth, right now the sit bones, then you have gravity now working for you because the navel point is actually engaged, holding the base of the spine, aligning itself with gravity, and the roots that you're growing allow the heart to lengthen and lift. Now, why does this happen? Because you have a couple of really big muscles. One of them is called your psoas, and your psoas connects from the top of your femur inside your hips and connects all the way up to your 12th thoracic vertebra of your spine. Now, not only does this muscle connect here, but there's another muscle in your body that also connects to some of these same vertebrae, and it's called your diaphragm. It comes from the front of your ribs all the way under and goes and fans down the opposite direction as your psoas. Now, when you contract your navel, what happens is actually some of the tension of your psoas is released. And when it releases, the diaphragm can also release. So if you have somebody who comes into class and they're sitting like this, what's happening is the psoas is actually contracting, plus the inner thighs are tightening to hold them in place. And how would you get somebody to get out of this position? You put a little lift under their hips, really helpful. Folded blanket, pillow, and then they can sit up on the sit bones. Once you can sit up on your sit bones, you can develop that relationship to gravity, and then the psoas can release and the diaphragm can release, and it's much easier to keep your spine straight and your heart lifted. So what is good posture? Good posture is actually how you develop a relationship to gravity and how you carry your heart. With the navel point engaged, the motion of energetically moving towards gravity, your heart lifts and comes into a regal place, if you will. Once you can get the rib cage in the right place, the shoulders will automatically relax and find their natural position. In Kundalini Yoga, we have a lot of asana where we're asked to raise our arms or bring them up overhead or bring them out front. It's really hard if the spine is not supporting the heart, because where your heart is, your arms will follow. For example, if you're sitting with a rounded spine and asked to lift your arms up to 90 degrees, it's really hard. They don't want to go into that position. It's almost as if the shoulder blades kind of lock. And to get them in the right position, people usually try and squeeze their shoulder blades together or something else. But if you actively engage your navel and then press down through your sit bones, what happens? The heart lifts. So look what happens when I engage my navel, press down through my sit bones, and let my rib cage come up. The arms automatically can come into a vertical position. This is extremely helpful for any extended length of time that you are going to meditate or hold your arms up for an asana. It also is really helpful as a reminder to holding the heart in the right place. Once this comes in the right place, the arms can be held and your shoulder blades actually can relax down the back. So one of the secrets, besides using this dynamic mulband, is actually that there's a bit of a spinal flex in many asana. And this spinal flex will go into back bends and forward bends, which a lot of people tend to have issues with. And I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to approach this and teach this in your classes. So first, we know where the navel point is. It's a great place to start beginners classes and teach new people. But to do a spinal flex without using your hands, you exhale, rock off your sit bones, rounding the spine. Inhale, press down through the sit bones and let the chest lift. Exhale back and inhale up. This motion, or any motion really in Kundalini Yoga, ideally is done smoothly. I like to say suavecito. The movement is smooth and it makes the navel point work. Your abdominals within the pelvis are going to work. And you'll probably start creating a good bit of heat. Really, we want to turn off the tension on the external muscles around the hips and use the muscles within the pelvis. This is a really key component to building correct asana. All right, so after trying that, getting people to move, a lot of people have trouble with that actually. They don't move the pelvis and they tend to try and move anywhere else in their body that will. You have to move the base first to get the rest of the spine to feel supported and thus turn off its unnecessary tension. Next, spinal flex with your hands on your shins. Same thing. Now we can actually use the arms to get a little more movement between the shoulder blades, upper back, and chest. Inhale and exhale. Notice the pelvic movement is the same as what we did without the hands. I always remind people to make the movement smooth. I see a lot of people collapsing, and what that does is it really pushes the heart out of the way. There's a saying, where your heart leads, your head can follow, but where your head leads, your heart can't follow. And this is both literally and figuratively true. If your head is trying to lead a movement, it's going to push the heart out of the way. And why I emphasize spinal flex in my teaching is because it's such a key component. You're building the basis for a good forward bend, which in turn will give you a good back bend. And here's where it begins. You exhale back, press down through the sit bones, inhale up. Right here, you're beginning a grounding at the sit bones, the heart's lifting, and if you take your hands onto your knees, you're beginning a back bend. So an upper back spinal flex here. Maybe a little bit less movement of the pelvis. But watch this. Press down, lift the chest, and then move the head. Right here, you have a back bend. That movement of grounding, letting the heart rise, and your head move last is the basis for back bends. Now, one of the things that's also happening here is the psoas is lengthening. This is really important, and how this plays out in your forward bends, I'll show you next. So let's do 2 more of those. You exhale back, press down through the sit bones, navel point will engage, lift the chest, and create space between the vertebrae. So come sitting with your legs out. One of the problems I see that a lot of people do is they lead with their head. If yoga were anything like boxing, you know what they say in boxing? Lead with your head, get hit in the head. Luckily, we don't get hit in yoga. One of the problems that I see a lot of students do, and honestly, a lot of teachers do, is lead with their head. And they tend to do this. They say, lift your arms up and reach for your toes. And then they do this. And then they start moving their head. What is this doing? Compressing the heart, actually pushing it out of the way. A forward bend is actually about moving from the biggest joint in your body, your hip joint. And to do that correctly, you have to get up on the sit bones, number one, which lengthens the psoas if you engage the navel point. And then from this point, you can begin to go forward. From here, you can go all the way forward, reaching for your toes, and then move from the hip joint. A lot of people aren't as flexible as that. This is a really good thing to do, is bend the knees. I know, that's not what it says. However, this is a place where people can begin and they can get up on their sit bones and then begin to bend forward. And it doesn't mean the head doesn't move. It just means it moves last. So inhale and exhale. Inhale, exhale. Because the angle here is what we're looking to decrease. If you want to get more flexible, you have to get to the psoas first and then the hamstring. The psoas is stronger than your hamstrings. So we have to lengthen it first. And once you start doing this, gravity will pull the legs down ultimately, and you will gain flexibility. I actually have a guarantee. How often do you hear that? If you continue to do this, I guarantee you will not get more flexible. If you do this with diligence, I guarantee you will. Yeah. So in a posture like this, where we're asked to hold on to the toes, I have to ask you this question in terms of what are we willing to compromise? Now the student's going to compromise whatever they will, but as teachers we want to offer them the best alternative to ideal. And I say there are three ways to do things: the ideal, realistic, and alternatives. Is this ideal? No. But who can do ideal? This is realistic, or maybe even an alternative. But what it does is it offers people the building block of correct alignment. And you will get more flexible if you move from this joint. How this applies to back bends actually is that in back bends, the psoas needs to lengthen. So if you practice contracting your psoas when you bend forward, you can't expect to be flexible enough to bend backwards. When you practice forward bends, you're actually practicing the basis for building a good back bend. So let's come into camel pose, or at least the beginning stages of it. On your knees, and I like to teach it with the toes tucked under, because this is an active position. People can begin to take some of the weight, or the root line, if you will, from the navel down to where you're grounding yourself or growing roots through the feet and the knees. First thing is you want to engage the navel. So contract within the pelvis towards the sacrum. This is where you are going to begin to get flexible in back bends. This movement. So you'll notice that just going back, I'm not moving the spine too much, and I'm definitely not putting the head back. So from here, engage the root lock, navel point, and begin to just tilt from the pelvis, lengthening there. Now, if people can do that well, then they can reach back for their heels. You'll notice that this is a really nice intermediate stage. Gives you about 2-3 inches between that and going into a deeper pose. You'll notice I haven't put my head back yet. It's because it moves last. This is a rule of yoga. Thy head shall move last. I don't know which text it came from, but it's a good one. So I have people begin just here. Because again, what do most students do? You tell them to come into camel pose, and they do all manner of this kind of stuff, right? Compressing and contracting. We want the spine to lengthen. So we practice forward bends, and in the forward bend, we were lengthening the psoas. In the back bend, we're doing the same thing. So both practices complement each other, are building blocks essentially for growing correct posture. This is a great movement just to have people begin. So many people want to see where they're going. I tell them, look at the tip of your nose. That's a really good tip for teaching when you're doing back bends. Cobra, wheel, camel, all of them. And if people can tilt here and reach back, then they can. You'll notice I'm trying to keep the pelvis over the knees. A lot of people have the tendency to lean back. The problem with that is that it doesn't really lengthen the spine. It's much harder to get traction. So you can even teach it having people lean up against a wall, put their thighs up against the wall, and try and keep them there. And as I said before, if you can turn the toes under and reach back, that's totally fine. But you want the head to move last, and any back bend, think about lengthening the vertebra. So the head keeps lengthening and releasing back. Strong roots in all back bends. I call them thigh burners because the thighs are really active, and whatever part of your body is touching the earth, you can imagine that roots are growing there. So you'll notice also that there's actually a little bit of a spinal flex just in this setup for this posture. This little tilt of the pelvis is like the beginning of a spinal flex. And then you move from there. Rather than, what do most people do? Compress their lower back and their neck. We want to try and spread the stretch throughout the whole spine. So that's a little introduction to divine alignment, how to use your navel point, how to carry your heart, and kind of the secrets of spinal flex, if you will. I hope that was helpful, and as always, divine alignment, the heart rules, are available tools to you. Sat Nam.